There's a pretty common theme about men that is often not spoken about, and in times when it is spoken about, it is usually veiled with sarcasm or perhaps a note of belittlement, and only in rare occasions is it expressed explicitly. Yet, almost every single man knows about this theme. And no, I'm not talking about the checkmate rule when it comes to urinals in the men's bathroom. For any ladies watching who have got no idea what I'm just talking about, go and ask your brothers or your father, your boyfriend, your male friends about the logistics of men's urinal etiquette, and they will inform you of what the checkmating rule actually is. Jokes aside though, what I'm talking about is the general idea that emotional men are weak, and the more emotional you are as a man, then the less successful you are going to be throughout your life. So in this video today, I want to explore and challenge that assumption of whether or not more emotional men are less successful. Or to put it into keyword terms that the YouTube algorithm is going to like, are emotional men less successful? So first of all, what does it mean to be emotional? Well, not so long ago, I put out a video about whether or not modern men are weak, which obviously I recommend that you go and watch after this video because it covers some overlapping themes, but in a little bit more detail and from a slightly different perspective. During that video, I asked the question, what does it mean to be too emotional? And I'd like to answer that question in this video as best as I can, and more importantly, as quickly as I can. Firstly, the dictionary definition. Emotional is an adjective which can mean of or pertaining to emotion, or it can mean of more than usual emotion. Unfortunately, this does leave us with a little bit of a gap in our knowledge, as I mentioned in the aforementioned video, which is to say, how much emotion are we supposed to express at any one time? Vocabulary.com does a slightly better job of giving a possible definition when it says that if someone says stop being so emotional, they're telling you to calm down because your feelings are out of control. When you're emotional, you're feeling lots of feelings. The opposite of emotional is logical. So we can already see that the term emotional has a pretty negative connotation to it. Being emotional is the enemy of logic, and it means that your feelings are in some way out of control. We also now know that emotional can mean of more than normal emotion, of more than usual emotion. Now, whilst I can't point to any rule or any law that states this, men are socialized to keep their emotions on total lock. There is this idea of the stoic man that all men are supposed to strive towards in their life. We don't cry, we don't get angry, we certainly don't get emotional. And it should be noted that this is not just a belief held about men by men, but also in large part it is a belief held about men by women also. Sometimes even an expression of joy or happiness or love is all too easily shut down because it is too girly, or perhaps even sometimes too gay. And this all firmly points towards the idea that men expressing any emotion more than the norm, which is to express no emotion, is being too emotional. And that is the reality for most men. So with that in mind, let's continue. So all of this really does beg an important question for men, which is, are emotions bad, and should they be avoided at all costs? My argument so far is that that is how most men are raised and brought up. And that is where the term emotional intelligence and the psychology behind it comes into play, in direct opposition to the commonly held belief that men shouldn't be too emotional, that men being emotional is a sign of weakness, and that men who are too emotional will not be successful. Because as we'll see throughout the remainder of this video, emotional intelligence, or as it is commonly known as EI or EQ, is a central character trait towards creating success for yourself as a man, or indeed as any other type of person. So what exactly is emotional intelligence? Well, we can actually look to the man who literally wrote the book on it, Daniel Goleman. And he writes, emotional intelligence is a person's ability to 1. Recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions, and 2. Recognize, understand, and influence the emotions of others. Emotional intelligence is an awareness that emotions can drive our behavior and impact people both positively and negatively, and an understanding that we have to learn how to manage those emotions, both ours and others. A large part of emotional intelligence is learning how to manage our emotions more effectively, and that takes simply ignoring our emotions off the table entirely. You have got to face your emotions head on and deal with them. A study on emotional suppression by Harvard found that suppressing your emotions can lead to a loss in life expectancy, and it could even increase your risk of getting cancer. And really, if that's not a good enough reason for you to look into emotional intelligence at least, then I don't know what is. But we're here to find out whether or not emotional men are more successful, not whether or not they live longer, although some could definitely argue that having a longer life is its own form of success. So that's what we're going to look at now. But before we do that, it's important that we understand a few things before we go any further. A few summarizing points, if you will. Firstly, we're looking to find out if those who are the right amount of emotional, which for men is near complete suppression, are more successful. Number 2 is that we have to remember that emotional intelligence is your ability to be aware of and manage your emotions. In other words, you recognize what you're feeling and you manage your response to those emotions as they occur instead of running away from them. And thirdly, emotional intelligence is the opposite of emotional suppression. So let's very briefly look at a few studies around emotional intelligence and success. This study, published in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health, found that even when personality traits and demographics were controlled for, higher levels of emotional intelligence were found to be a strong predictor of career success. Another study found that couples with low emotional intelligence scored lower on positive relationship quality compared to couples who had one partner high in emotional intelligence or both partners high in emotional intelligence. Yet another study shows that higher levels of emotional intelligence are predictive of better levels of mental health. Further studies have shown that high emotional intelligence is a strong predictor of higher levels of leadership effectiveness, higher levels of academic performance, and more general success. And if I wanted to make this video far more boring than it already is, I could continue to pull out study after study after study that shows that emotional intelligence, which is to say managing your emotions appropriately, so feeling them and expressing them, is positively correlated or is a strong predictor of success in literally every single area of life. So it then stands that simply suppressing your emotions is not at all correlated with success at all. Ultimately, it all comes down to proper discipline. You see, emotional intelligence and emotional discipline are nearly synonymous with one another. They basically mean the same thing. When you were younger, you learned not to crap your pants by disciplining your body. You learned how to crawl, then walk, then run, again by learning how to discipline your body and also your mind. Again, later on in life, you learned how to read, write, and communicate through properly disciplining your body and your mind. Yet when it comes to our emotions, our immediate response as men is to lock them away in a basement and pray to God that they just sort themselves out instead. And if you do think of your untrained and undisciplined emotions as a misbehaving child, then when did locking them away in a closet or a basement ever create a better adjusted child. If emotional intelligence is as strong a predictor of success as most psychologists seem to agree that it is, then emotional intelligence and emotional discipline is something that you must master for yourself as a man if you want to achieve any measure of success in your life, whether that is career, relationships, or just more general happiness. When emotions are properly under your control, you can transmute them into power. And I'm not talking about esoteric concepts of alchemy or anything like that. I'm talking about being able to use your emotions for your own betterment, to motivate you, to strengthen you, to make you more bold, more courageous, more confident. Millennia's worth of fighters, soldiers, and warriors have known that by feeling their fear, their anger, and their hatred towards their enemy or their opponent, and then channeling those feelings made them better at what it is they had to do, and it made them more likely to win, to survive, to conquer. We might not have to fight anymore as men, but we can still learn how to turn our emotions into power. Understanding how our emotions affect and influence us gives us better insight into how our emotions can affect and influence other people, or how their emotions can do the same to them or to us. Understanding our emotions gives rise to our abilities as men to influence others, as well as ourselves, for the better. Locking your emotions away will not make you more successful. The data is firmly against that concept. Gaining experience, awareness, and understanding of your emotions gives you the power to make your life a success in literally every single area. The first step towards emotional intelligence is understanding our own emotions. What are they saying? What do they mean? And what can they do for us? So I would highly encourage you to take that first step. Ultimately, you've got nothing to lose by learning how to practice emotional intelligence and emotional discipline, and you have everything to gain in terms of success in every single area of your life. And if you want a TLDW for the end of this video, it would be emotional suppression bad, emotional intelligence good. Go out there and learn emotional intelligence. Thank you very much for watching.